Well, I decided I had enough to do a Acts Scholar video this week. In particular, I found out something interesting. So when I was writing up my interpretations from Acts 1 for my blog, I realized that when I'd looked at Psalm 109, 6, I had happened to have the RSV up. And in the RSV, you have this "they say" there. And so the way it comes out in the RSV is the psalmist is basically saying, "Don't be silent, God. People are speaking against me. They're accusing me. They're rewarding evil for good." And then we have in the NRSV, "They say, appoint a wicked man against him." And so in the NRSV, when it says in verse 8, "May someone else seize his position," it's the wicked people talking about the psalmist. I didn't even look anywhere else. But I've realized, just by coincidence, that this footnote B here in the NRSV indicates, it's kind of, I've been trying to track it down, and what I've come to the conclusion of is that the NRSV translator has interpreted this paragraph, these verses here, as being the accuser talking. There isn't actually the words "they say" there in Hebrew or Greek, or as far as I can see in any manuscript of the Old Testament. In fact, you'll notice that the NIV here, it's a continuous train of thought. "They repay me evil for good, and hatred for my appoint someone evil." So in the NIV and in many, maybe most modern translations, King James, etc., this turns out to be the psalmist speaking. So the psalmist talks about his enemies, and then here he says, "God, please appoint someone evil to appoint my enemy. Let an accuser, when he's tried, let him be found guilty. Let his days be few. May another take his place of leadership." And so I've done just some spot checking. It looks to me like the NRSV, the Common English Bible, the New Living Translation, just from the handful I looked, insert "they say" here, because they're continuing with the idea that this continues to be his enemies talking. The NIV, the ESV, the NASB, the King James, on the other hand, they see this as the psalmist calling on God to bring up someone evil against his enemy. Now, I have conflicting thoughts. I'll just share them. The scholar in me suggests that you shouldn't usually insert words in without good reason. And I wonder if the NRSV translators felt like surely David wouldn't say something like here. Surely David wouldn't say, "May his children be orphans, kill off this guy, God." And so the NLT, the NRSV, the CEB interpret, there is a shift here, because here they're talking about "they," and here they're talking about "him." So there's a little bit of shift to justify adding a "they say." But probably, so the scholar in me says, don't add words where they're not there. And I wonder if the NRSV just felt like David wouldn't say something like this. And so they use the slight shift between 5 and 6 to suggest that this is actually David's enemies talking, or whoever, the psalmist enemies. Well, I don't feel like I know enough to have a definitive perspective on this, but it is interesting, the things you find out when you're just poking around in the Bible. Okay, the other interesting thing this week is I was curious about this casting of lots. How did it happen? How did they cast lots? As best I can tell, and again, I haven't done a thorough search on this, but as best I can tell, largely on the basis of Craig Keener's commentary, that the way the Greeks at least seem to have cast lots is that they would put some little stones with things on them, the options on the stones, so like you would put M for Matthias, maybe and the other guy on a stone, and then you kind of, I don't know, shake the jar until one of them comes out, and the lot that falls out is the lot that is, so if M, the stone with M falls out, then the lot has chosen Matthias. It's kind of like rolling dice in a way. But I was very curious what this strange word here, synkatapsephizomai, might be. And so, interestingly enough, this word only occurs one time in the New Testament. So it's not very helpful to do a word study on it because it's only here. This stuff here I consider to be laden with the overload fallacy. I pay almost no attention to Thayer's or the outline of biblical usage because it seems to be it's rife with the overload fallacy. So like this definition, to be depositing a ballot in the urn to assign a place among. Well, that's a lot to get out of one word. And so I did a brief search, and let me go now to Kittle's Theological Dictionary, which I do own, so I was able to get the rest of this entry, not just this here. But it looks here that this word is only attested elsewhere in Plutarch's Themistocles, which, if I'm understanding correctly, this word is only used 2 times in all Greek literature that has survived from the time of Homer to the time of the New Testament. That's pretty crazy. In Plutarch, it has a sense of pronouncing guilty or condemning. But of course, since we're talking about replacing a disciple, that doesn't work here. So we have pretty scanty evidence for what this word means as far as casting lots. Well, there's a few thoughts as I've tried to pursue exegetically a few issues in Acts 1 as I finished up this 5-week series in Acts 1. So on to Acts 2 next week.